I wasn't planning on making this video this week, but after seeing a nanny post in a nanny group asking for advice around a bad reference and the list of suggestions that came afterwards about lying, providing fake references, I just knew this was something we needed to tackle. So let's get right to it and see how you can still move on with your nanny career even after getting a bad reference. If we haven't met before, I'm Michelle Kelsey, founder of the Nanny Solution by Nannies on Call. Each week, I bring you new videos to educate and inspire you to get better job, make more money, and become leaders in the industry. Let's get right into talking about references. A bad reference is certainly not the end of your nanny career, and there are lots of steps you can take to make sure that it doesn't stop you from getting your next job. Tip number one is to be proactive. Having one bad reference isn't going to stop you from getting future jobs, but you need to be honest with the family or the agency upfront on why maybe that family can't be contacted. You know, did you give them 2 weeks notice or a month notice and they were really unhappy because you'd been there for a long time and they're just gonna give you a bad reference for that? Were you late all the time? What was the reason they gave you a bad reference? And we've seen it all at the agency. There are so many reasons that aren't the nanny's fault, and it's just the families being bitter and resentful. But there's also times when maybe nannies have made mistakes, but they've grown and they've learned from it and they are going to do better next time. That shouldn't stop you from getting your next job. Being part of proactive is also telling the families that you're going to be giving them as a reference. Giving them a call ahead of time and warning them that the agency or the family is going to be calling because you're looking for a new position. This gives you the opportunity to ensure that they're happy to give a reference and that they're going to be giving you a good reference. Overall, you just want to make sure you're being proactive because so many nannies have given us their list of references, and then when we call the family, they tell us, the family gives us a bad reference, and then when we go back to the nanny, we have to have a conversation. Instead, we have a lot of nannies who also say, I'm gonna give you this reference number, and they've said they'll be a reference for me, but I just wanna let you know that it ended badly, or we had bad communication. Whatever the situation is, you just want to be upfront and be honest about that situation, which takes us into tip number two. Always tell the truth. What I saw in this nanny group this week was slightly disturbing in that the nannies were suggesting that they lie and either A, not give that as a reference, which actually, depending on how long you've been somewhere, if you've only been in a job for 3 to 6 months, you might just want to leave that off your resume altogether if it was a bad situation. But B, they were suggesting that these other nannies provide the reference for that nanny, which is crazy because you're in a Facebook group with over 2,000 people. You don't know this nanny. What if you are putting children at risk? So I just want to you to think about that, is providing a fake reference could put children at risk. This is not worth it. In this case, it wasn't her fault. And if she came to the agency with a description of what had happened, we've been doing this long enough to figure out what's true and what's not, what's accurate and what's not, and a way to verify the situation. Just remember, lying is never the best way to start a relationship, and often you're going to get caught in these lies, and that's not going to work out for you better, and it's going to leave you in a worse position than you were before. The nanny industry in your city is very small, and people talk, agencies talk, and families talk, and this may stop you from getting jobs in the future. The bad reference is not going to stop you from getting new jobs. The lying will, though. The best way to deal with a bad reference is to bury it in great references. Of course. So the more great references you have, one bad reference, even if you give it to the family or the agency, isn't gonna hurt you, because there are situations, communication might have been a problem. You didn't get along with the kids. You didn't get along with the family. The family's expectations were too high in terms of your job creep and all of those things. There are so many reasons it doesn't work out and that families give bad references. Agencies can certainly figure that out. They've seen it so many times before. If you were at a family for a year, 2 years, 3 years, and then all of a sudden the family gives you a bad reference, the question is, why now, right? They thought you were good enough to work for them for 3 years, so why are they giving you a bad reference? That's a long time to work for a family. So we can work those things out. The more money you want to earn as a nanny, the more references you need to have. So make sure every time you leave a position, you get a reference letter. If it's possible, that's the best way. And then the next way is obviously your references being verified. If you're moving around lots of positions, it can be difficult because you don't always want those same references to be called. We understand that. So that's another reason to go with an agency. It's a great way to stop from over calling of your references. Tip number 4 is own your mistakes. Did you leave without giving notice? Were you late all the time? Did you call in sick too many times? What kind of things are the family going to say when they get called for a reference? And how can you be, again, proactive, goes back to tip number 1, and own your mistakes by telling the family or the nanny agency, I understand I left without giving notice. The unfortunate part is the family was making me stay late, making me clean the house when that wasn't part of my job. Whatever the situation was, then you can back it up with the things you did. But saying, I never want to leave a job without giving notice again. I hated doing it. I understand it's not professional. So taking some accountability for the part that you had in the situation. Or if you were late all the time and it was for a personal reason or sick because you were going through something, you need to own those mistakes, take responsibility, explain what happened, and say you understand that it's important and it won't happen again. Taking responsibility for your part in the situation so that you can move on and get another great job. One of the things you can do when you get a bad reference is use an agency, because we can talk around this. We go to bat for nannies every day who've received bad references from past families. And the reason is, all the things we said, they take responsibilities, they have lots of references that we can verify, but also we understand well, we've been doing it for 20 years. So after doing it for 20 years, we understand that sometimes it's not a good fit. We understand that sometimes families are the problem. It's not the nanny, it's the family. Even though I understand that a lot of the time it's the nanny getting blamed. At the agency, we can help talk around your past negative reference by building up the things we do know about you and really selling you. So using an agency is a great way to help you if you've had a recent negative bad reference, that the agency can then also verify your other experiences, your other references, and be able to help you move forward from that one bad reference. Sometimes there's nothing you can do about getting a bad reference. It's completely out of your hands. But here are a couple tips to help you when you're about to leave a job. Ensure that you get the best reference possible. Number 1 is give it 110% until the last day. In every job, people tend to slack as soon as they've given notice or know they're leaving, especially if it's a bad situation. But you want to go out on top. So make sure you're giving it 110% right up until the last moment. Sometimes things don't work out, whether it's communication styles or connections with the parents or children, but you want to make sure that at the very least in your reference, they say you were professional the entire time. So if they say, you know, the communication style wasn't the same, or if they say you didn't connect with the children, that's one thing. But you want them always to be saying the nanny was professional, showed up on time, was never late, was never sick. All of those things are also important. So when we get references, lots of questions are asked. So it's easy to see if there was a problem overall or just a problem with that specific family. It can be really hard as a nanny to give notice and to leave a family. And sometimes that family is extremely disappointed after you give notice, which can lead to a bad reference. Just try and time, if you can at all, try and time when you ask for the reference and give a bit of a cooling off period. So don't, give your notice, you understand the family's upset, and then you're moving to another family and they call within a week. It might not be enough time to cool off. So if you can at all, give the family a bit of cooling off period. That might be really helpful to ensure you get a better reference. And finally, never give out your reference information before you've given notice at a job. We've seen this happen a few times, and it's really unfortunate because the family's caught off guard. The nanny ends up getting a bad reference because they haven't even told the family that they're leaving, and it ends up in job loss, prior to finding a new position. It goes back to what I said before. You always want to make sure you ask the family if they're willing to be a reference so that you don't create any surprises, and let them know that someone will be calling shortly. That way everyone's prepared and you're most likely to get a great reference. I also want to say that it depends on where in the world you live. The amount of reference information the family can give out will depend on where you live and the laws surrounding that. In some places, making bad remarks about a past employee could be seen as illegal, and you could have a case for going after them. I personally don't know any nannies who've gone after past employers, but I do know it's a possibility if that family is spreading negative, untrue things about you. You can look into the laws in your country if this does become a problem to you. But really, I think it's only a problem if the family's stopping you from getting work in the future, and if they're bad-mouthing you on nanny groups around town. Then you're going to want to send a cease and desist letter, but I think realistically in 95% of the cases, it never gets to that point. So let's try and keep it positive, use your best references, and make sure that you have tons of experience. The reality is, one bad reference is not going to ruin your future job potential. If you want more information on how to get a reference from a family, you can check out the video we have right here. Otherwise, I hope that was helpful, and we'll see you next Saturday.